This narrative unveils the enigmatic journey of a young boy, whose singular quest to conquer death set him apart from his contemporaries and perplexed all who encountered him. Born into a modest family in the late 19th century, this child exhibited an extraordinary determination and intellectual curiosity that belied his tender age. From an early childhood marked by quiet observation and an insatiable hunger for knowledge, he embarked on a path few dared to tread, attempting to unravel the mysteries of mortality by using his own body as the laboratory for discovery. Before we dive into the haunting tale of a young boy driven by an extraordinary ambition to conquer death through self-experimentation, don't forget to subscribe and like the video so you never miss a chilling story. And I'd love to know, what thoughts cross your mind as you listen to this eerie journey? Unlike other children of his time, whose innocence was often shielded from the harsh realities of life and death, this boy confronted the concept of mortality head-on. His demeanor carried a certain gravity unusual for someone so young, an aura that hinted at the profound internal struggles driving his pursuits. His peers regarded him with a mixture of fascination and unease, sensing a depth of contemplation rarely seen in children. Family members, while initially proud of his prodigious talents, soon found themselves grappling with a growing disquiet as his fixation on death intensified. The boy's intellectual gifts were undeniable. Fluent in several languages by the age of 7, he devoured texts on natural philosophy, anatomy, and the emerging sciences, with an intensity that both inspired and alarmed his teachers. Yet it was not mere academic curiosity that propelled him. Rather, it was a deeply personal and urgent desire to transcend the finality that death represented. To him, death was not an inevitable end, but a challenge to be overcome, a problem solvable through perseverance and experimentation. This obsession manifested early in his life through a series of self-directed inquiries and trials. He would spend hours dissecting small animals, not out of cruelty, but from a scientist's eagerness to understand the mechanisms of life and decay. His notebooks, filled with meticulous sketches and observations, reflected a mind consumed by questions about the boundary between life and death. This was not mere childish fascination, but the work of a mind wrestling with profound existential dilemmas far beyond his years. His family's initial response was one of cautious encouragement, hoping that his unusual interests would blossom into a meaningful vocation. However, as his experiments grew more radical, involving prolonged periods of self-imposed isolation and physical endurance tests, their concern mounted. They witnessed changes in his behavior, a growing detachment from everyday joys, an unyielding focus on his studies, and a willingness to endure pain and discomfort in pursuit of his goals. This transformed the boy from a prodigy into something of a mystery and a cause for worry. Neighbors and acquaintances began to whisper about the child, who seemed to court danger with a reckless disregard for his own well-being. Tales spread of his daring escapades to test human endurance, including fasting for days, exposure to extreme cold, and other self-imposed trials designed to push the limits of his body. Yet, despite these hardships, he showed remarkable resilience, often emerging from these experiences with renewed vigor and a deeper conviction that death was a foe to be vanquished rather than accepted. This peculiar combination of youthful innocence and intense determination created an aura of mystery around him. He was neither fully embraced nor entirely shunned by his community. Adults regarded him with a mixture of admiration for his intellect and unease about the potential consequences of his unorthodox pursuits. Children were simultaneously drawn to and frightened by his presence, sensing that his journey was one that transcended the ordinary bounds of childhood. Central to this enigma was the boy's unwavering belief that the key to conquering death lay not in external remedies, but within the transformations of his own body and mind. He envisioned a process of self-transmutation, wherein the natural vulnerabilities that led to decay and demise could be altered or eradicated through rigorous self-experimentation. This radical notion placed him at odds with the prevailing medical and philosophical thought of his time, which largely accepted death as an immutable fact of life. Despite his youth, the boy demonstrated a maturity of thought and a methodological rigor that suggested a mind far beyond his years. He kept detailed records of his experiments, noting changes in his physical and mental states with scientific precision. These records, later discovered by those who chronicled his life, reveal a commitment to systematic inquiry and an almost clinical detachment in observing the effects of his trials upon himself. Yet beneath this clinical exterior lay a poignant human story. A child wrestling with fear, hope, and the profound loneliness that often accompanies those who dare to challenge the natural order. His quest was not merely an intellectual exercise, but a deeply emotional journey, fueled by a desire to escape the shadow of death that loomed over him and those he loved. It was this blend of brilliance and vulnerability that rendered his story both compelling and tragic. The boy's journey to cure death, using himself as the instrument of discovery, thus stands as a remarkable testament to human curiosity and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. It is a tale that transcends the boundaries of childhood and probes the deepest questions of existence. In the years that followed, his life and experiments would captivate the attention of both medical professionals and philosophers, igniting debates about the ethics and feasibility of such self-directed quests for immortality. This initial chapter of his story lays bare the genesis of a singular obsession, a child driven by an extraordinary will to defy the most fundamental limitation of human life. It sets the stage for a complex narrative that intertwines the innocence of youth with the profound implications of seeking to overcome death itself. As the boy's experiments grew more audacious, so too did the mystery surrounding his fate, inviting us to ponder the boundaries of science, the nature of mortality, and the price of knowledge pursued at the expense of one's own body and spirit. In order to fully comprehend the extraordinary journey of this young boy's quest to conquer death, it is essential to situate his story within the broader historical and cultural landscape of the era in which he lived. The late 19th century was a period marked by profound transformations in scientific thought, social structures, and prevailing attitudes toward life and mortality. Against this backdrop, the boy's ambitions were both a reflection of and a rebellion against the dominant paradigms of his time. The world he inhabited was one where death was omnipresent, yet cloaked in mystery and superstition. Medical science, though advancing rapidly, had yet to unravel many of the fundamental mechanisms of life and decay. The germ theory of disease was gaining traction, but effective treatments were limited, and the inevitability of death, especially from infectious diseases, was widely accepted as an immutable truth. In this context, death was often perceived through a dual lens, a natural endpoint ordained by divine will, and a formidable adversary to be feared and respected. Childhood during this era was a concept in flux. The rise of industrialization and urbanization had begun to reshape family dynamics and societal expectations. While romanticized notions of childhood innocence persisted, Many children were expected to contribute to family livelihoods or endure harsh conditions. Education was becoming more accessible, but the boundaries of what children could learn or understand were still rigidly defined. The idea that a child could engage deeply with complex scientific questions or challenge fundamental truths was, for many, inconceivable. Within this cultural milieu, the boy's family occupied a modest social position. His parents, neither impoverished nor affluent, were part of the burgeoning middle class that valued education and self-improvement. They provided an environment that nurtured intellectual curiosity, but were also deeply rooted in traditional beliefs and religious practices. This duality created a fertile yet conflicted ground for the boy's burgeoning obsession with death and the possibility of overcoming it. The family's household was filled with books and newspapers, a testament to their aspirations and the intellectual currents of the age. Yet, conversations about death remained largely veiled in euphemism or religious consolation. The boy, however, approached the subject with a stark pragmatism that unsettled his parents. To them, death was a solemn mystery, to be accepted with faith and humility. To him, it was a challenge to be dissected, understood, and ultimately conquered. The cultural attitudes toward science and knowledge during this period were characterized by a mix of enthusiasm and caution. The rapid advancements in fields such as chemistry, biology, and physics inspired a generation to believe that human reason could unlock the secrets of nature. At the same time, there was a palpable anxiety about the limits of this knowledge and the moral implications of pushing those boundaries. This tension was particularly acute in matters concerning life and death, where scientific inquiry often collided with religious doctrine and ethical considerations. The boy's early life was shaped by these conflicting influences. His education was rigorous, with tutors who introduced him to the scientific works of figures like Darwin, Pasteur, and Galvani. He absorbed these teachings with a voracious appetite, yet he also encountered resistance from family members and community leaders who viewed such knowledge as dangerous or inappropriate for a child. This tension fueled his resolve, sharpening his focus on the problem that consumed him, the conquest of death. His family environment was both a sanctuary and a battleground. His parents, while loving and supportive, struggled to reconcile their hopes for a conventional childhood with the boy's increasingly unconventional pursuits. Religious rituals and prayers for protection became a backdrop to his experiments and inquiries, underscoring the chasm between faith and science that framed his existence. The boy's siblings, where present, often kept their distance, unable to grasp the intensity of his obsession or the isolation it imposed. Moreover, the community around them reflected the broader societal ambivalence. Neighbors and local educators were intrigued by the boy's intellect, but wary of his preoccupation with death. Some saw in him a prodigy destined for greatness. Others whispered of madness or blasphemy. This social tension mirrored the cultural crossroads of the time, where enlightenment and superstition coexisted uneasily. The boy's life became a microcosm of this larger struggle between tradition and progress. The era's medical understanding further contextualizes the boy's quest. While hospitals and asylums were becoming more common, their practices were rudimentary by modern standards, and the boundary between healing and harm was often blurred. The concept of self-experimentation, though rare, had precedence among pioneering scientists who sought to test hypotheses on their own bodies. However, such endeavors were typically undertaken by adults, trained and prepared for the risks involved. For a child to embark on such a path was highly unusual and fraught with peril. In this climate, the The boy's determination to use himself as an instrument in the search for a cure to death was both radical and deeply unsettling. It challenged the societal norms that delineated the roles of children, the limits of scientific inquiry, and the sanctity of life itself. His experiments were not mere childish play, but deliberate acts of defiance against the accepted order, grounded in a sophisticated understanding of contemporary science, yet propelled by a personal urgency that transcended rational calculation. The cultural and historical context also shaped the boy's conceptualization of death. Influenced by religious teachings, folk beliefs, and emerging scientific theories, death was a multifaceted phenomenon, at once a spiritual transition, a physical decay, and a medical mystery. The boy sought to navigate and reconcile these dimensions, envisioning a transformative process that could alter the very fabric of human mortality. His vision was not limited to prolonging life, but aimed at fundamentally altering the conditions that made death inevitable. This ambitious vision was nurtured in a family environment that, despite its traditional leanings, fostered intellectual exploration. The boy's parents, educators, and mentors provided him with access to books, experiments, and discussions that fueled his imagination and analytical skills. Yet, their protective instincts and cultural conditioning imposed boundaries that he repeatedly tested and transgressed. This dynamic created a tension that underscored the boy's isolation and the profound nature of his quest. Thus, the historical and cultural setting of this young boy's life offers crucial insights into the forces that shaped his extraordinary journey. It reveals a world caught between old certainties and new possibilities, where a child's obsession with death could be both a symptom of and a challenge to the prevailing order. Understanding this context allows us to appreciate the courage, complexity, and tragedy inherent in his pursuit, a pursuit that would ultimately question the very essence of life, death, and the human condition. The young boy's awakening to the stark reality of mortality marked a turning point that would irrevocably shape the course of his life and endeavors. Though death had been a distant concept during his earliest years, like many children sheltered by the innocence of youth, a series of events gradually stripped away this veneer, revealing the fragility and inevitability that lurked beneath. This awakening ignited within him a profound fascination and a relentless drive to understand, and ultimately to overcome, the finality of death. The catalyst for this transformation was both personal and deeply affecting. A close family member, a beloved relative whose presence had been a source of comfort and stability, succumbed unexpectedly to illness. The boy, then barely 7 years old, confronted the unfiltered grief and confusion that accompanied loss. Witnessing the physical decline, the pallor of death, and the rituals that followed, he grappled with questions that no adult seemed able to answer satisfactorily. What is death? Why does it come for us all? Could it be stopped? This encounter with mortality was not merely an emotional shock, but a profound intellectual challenge. The boy's mind, already sharp and inquisitive, began to probe the nature of life and death with an intensity that startled those around him. He sought answers in books, observing the natural world with renewed scrutiny, and experimenting in ways that hinted at a budding scientific mind determined to pierce the veil of the unknown. His early experiments were modest but telling. He collected specimens of decaying plants and small animals, noting the processes of decomposition with meticulous detail. He observed how life ebbed away, how cells broke down, and how what was once vibrant became inert. These observations were not morbid curiosities, but methodical inquiries into the mechanisms of decay. Each discovery deepened his resolve to find a way to halt or reverse these processes. Family members noticed the shift in his demeanor and priorities. The boy, once playful and light-hearted, became increasingly withdrawn and serious. His conversations revolved less around the everyday concerns of children and more around theories of life, death, and the possibility of transcendence. This change elicited a complex mixture of responses: admiration for his intellect, concern for his emotional well-being, and confusion over his singular focus. At school, his teachers observed his growing detachment from conventional subjects and social interactions. While he excelled academically, his thoughts often seemed elsewhere, consumed by questions that transcended the curriculum. His peers found him increasingly enigmatic. Some were drawn to his unusual insights, while others regarded him with a wary distance. The boy's insistence on discussing death, a topic considered taboo or frightening, further isolated him. Within the home, the atmosphere became tense as the boy's obsession with mortality deepened. His parents struggled to balance support for his intellectual growth with their fears for his psychological health. They sought counsel from clergy and local healers, hoping to temper his fixation with spiritual guidance or traditional remedies. Yet, these interventions fell short of addressing the boy's relentless quest for empirical understanding. The boy's early writings and drawings from this period reveal a mind grappling with complex concepts of existence and cessation. He began to formulate hypotheses about the nature of life forces, the role of the body in sustaining consciousness, and the potential for transformation beyond physical death. These nascent theories, while rudimentary, demonstrated a remarkable synthesis of scientific curiosity and metaphysical speculation. As his experiments progressed, the boy began to test the limits of his own body and mind. He subjected himself to controlled periods of fasting, exposure to cold, and other physical trials aimed at understanding endurance and the thresholds between life and death. These self-examinations were conducted with a seriousness and discipline unusual for his age, reflecting a determination to embody his inquiries rather than remain a passive observer. His family's reaction to these self-imposed trials was one of escalating concern. They witnessed the physical toll these experiments took: pallor, fatigue, occasional fainting spells. Despite warnings and pleas, the boy's resolve did not waver. He viewed these hardships as necessary sacrifices on the path to unraveling the mysteries that haunted him. His willingness to endure pain and risk his health underscored the depth of his obsession and the urgency he felt. Beyond physical trials, the boy's psychological state exhibited signs of strain. He oscillated between moments of intense focus and periods of despair, haunted by the specter of death, yet driven by the hope of triumph. His nightmares, fragmented thoughts, and occasional withdrawal into silence revealed the emotional weight of his pursuit. Yet, even in his darkest moments, he displayed a clarity of purpose that confounded those who sought to understand him. The boy's fascination with death extended beyond scientific inquiry into a profound philosophical engagement. He pondered the meaning of life in the face of mortality, questioning the nature of the soul, consciousness, and what, if anything, might lie beyond physical existence. These reflections were often recorded in his journals, where poetic musings intertwined with scientific notes, revealing a mind striving to bridge the material and spiritual realms. His growing knowledge and experimentation began to attract the attention of local scholars and physicians, who were intrigued by the boy's advanced understanding and unusual methods. Some viewed him as a prodigy pushing the boundaries of conventional science, while others expressed skepticism or concern about the implications of a child engaging in such perilous self-experimentation. This emerging interest added a layer of complexity to the boy's life, exposing him to external scrutiny and debate. Despite these pressures, the boy remained steadfast. His early awakening to mortality was not a fleeting phase, but a defining moment that set the trajectory of his life. It fueled an unyielding quest to transform death from an immutable fate into a challenge that science and willpower could overcome. This quest became his identity, overshadowing the innocence of childhood and marking the beginning of an extraordinary and often troubling journey into the unknown. Through this period of awakening, the boy embodied the paradox of youthful innocence, confronted by the harsh realities of existence. His story illuminates the profound impact that early encounters with mortality can have on a developing mind, shaping not only intellectual pursuits, but also emotional landscapes. It is a narrative of transformation, a passage from the naive acceptance of death to a fierce, almost defiant, engagement with its mysteries. This chapter in the boy's life reveals the depth of his internal struggle and the origins of his radical approach to conquering death. It offers a glimpse into the mind of a child who, faced with loss and uncertainty, chose to confront the ultimate question head-on. This awakening would propel him into uncharted territories of self-experimentation and scientific inquiry, setting the stage for the extraordinary and often perilous endeavors that lay ahead. As the boy's early fascination with mortality deepened into a consuming obsession, his methods of inquiry evolved from passive observation to active experimentation, marked by a radical and unconventional approach that would come to define his quest. Rejecting the boundaries that separated scientific exploration from personal experience, he embraced a path of self-experimentation, subjecting his own body and mind to rigorous trials in pursuit of a cure for death. This willingness to become both scientist and subject was as astonishing as it was alarming, reflecting a maturity and audacity far beyond his years. His initial experiments sought to unravel the biological processes that underpinned life and death. Drawing upon the scientific texts he had absorbed, the boy hypothesized that death might be prevented or reversed through altering the body's internal conditions. To test these ideas, he devised physical trials designed to push the limits of human endurance and resilience. These included extended fasting periods, controlled exposure to cold, and attempts to manipulate his breathing and heartbeat through meditation and self-regulation techniques. Each experiment was meticulously recorded in his journals, with notes on physiological responses and subjective experiences. The boy's experiments were not mere acts of youthful bravado, but carried a deliberate scientific methodology. He approached each trial with careful preparation and observation, adjusting variables and documenting outcomes in search of patterns and insights. This systematic approach distinguished him from mere dabblers, aligning his efforts more closely with the practices of adult researchers who used themselves as test subjects in pursuit of knowledge. However, the physical toll of these experiments soon became apparent. Prolonged fasting led to episodes of dizziness and weakness. Exposure to cold left him vulnerable to illness, and attempts at physiological control sometimes resulted in fainting or disorientation. Despite these dangers, the boy displayed a remarkable resilience, often recovering quickly and interpreting setbacks as data points rather than failures. His resolve to continue, even in the face of physical harm, underscored the intensity of his commitment and the depth of his conviction. Psychologically, the boy's self-experimentation was both a source of empowerment and a reflection of inner turmoil. The trials demanded immense concentration and willpower, requiring him to confront pain, fear, and the instinct for self-preservation. At times, the boundary between scientific inquiry and self-punishment blurred, as his experiments verged on acts of self-harm, driven by desperation to unlock the secrets of life and death. Family members and observers noted a growing tension in his demeanor, oscillating between moments of calm control and episodes of agitation or withdrawal. This radical approach soon drew the attention and concern of those closest to him. His parents, initially supportive of his intellectual pursuits, became alarmed by the physical and emotional risks he was undertaking. They pleaded with him to moderate his experiments, fearing for his health and sanity. Local healers and clergy were consulted, offering spiritual remedies and cautioning against what they perceived as dangerous hubris. Yet the boy remained undeterred, convinced that only through direct personal experience could true understanding be attained. The community's response to the boy's self-experimentation was marked by a mixture of fascination, skepticism, and fear. Neighbors whispered of the strange rituals he performed in solitude. Teachers expressed unease over his withdrawal from normal childhood activities, and medical practitioners debated the appropriateness of such extreme self-directed trials in one so young. This growing isolation reinforced the boy's sense of mission, but also heightened the risks of physical and psychological harm. Amid these tensions, the boy began to explore more esoteric techniques to alter his bodily functions. Influenced by contemporary explorations into hypnosis, mesmerism, and emerging psychological theories, he experimented with self-induced trance states and meditation as potential means to transcend physical limitations. These experiments blurred the lines between science, mysticism, and personal belief, reflecting the complex intellectual environment of his time and his own search for novel pathways to conquer death. His journals from this period reveal detailed accounts of altered states of consciousness, sensations of detachment from the body, and fleeting experiences of what he described as life beyond death. While these episodes were often brief and difficult to reproduce, they reinforced his conviction that death was not an absolute boundary, but a threshold that might be crossed or even undone through the right combination of physical and mental discipline. The boy's willingness to test these radical ideas on himself, in defiance of caution and convention, created a growing rift between him and his family. Their attempts to intervene were met with resistance, as he viewed their concerns as obstacles to his ultimate goal. This tension underscored the tragic dimension of his quest, a child driven by a profound desire to save life, yet risking his own well-being and relationships in the process. Medical professionals who later reviewed his case would note the precocious nature of his self-directed research, acknowledging both the scientific curiosity and the peril inherent in such endeavors. His experiments anticipated in many ways later developments in biohacking and self-experimentation, though carried out without the safeguards or knowledge of modern science. The paradox of his situation, a child pioneering dangerous methods in the absence of adult guidance, became a focal point for debates about ethics, childhood autonomy, and the limits of scientific pursuit. Despite warnings and setbacks, the boy's self-experimentation intensified, propelled by an unwavering belief that his body held the key to defeating death. He envisioned a process of bodily transformation, a re-engineering of the human organism that could resist decay and extend life indefinitely. This vision was not abstract, but embodied in concrete, often painful trials that sought to test the boundaries of physical endurance and mental fortitude. In the solitude of his room, surrounded by scientific texts and notes, the boy conducted these experiments with a seriousness that confounded those who encountered him. The boy who had once been a child playing in the sunlight was now a figure of relentless determination, willing to endure suffering and isolation in the hope of unlocking the ultimate secret. His self-experimentation was both a scientific endeavor and a personal odyssey, a fusion of intellect, courage, and desperation that defied easy explanation. This chapter in the boy's story reveals the depth and radical nature of his methods, highlighting a journey that transcended the conventional boundaries of childhood and science. It portrays a young mind willing to sacrifice comfort, health, and social acceptance in pursuit of a goal that seemed both impossible and irresistible. His unconventional experiments marked the emergence of a figure who would challenge prevailing notions of life and death, drawing him ever closer to a fate as mysterious as his quest itself. As the boy's self-experimentation grew increasingly daring and unorthodox, the ripples of his actions extended beyond the confines of his household, drawing the attention and concern of neighbors, educators, and local healers. His behavior, once seen as the curious pursuits of a precocious child, began to provoke unease and skepticism throughout the community. This mounting apprehension marked a critical juncture in his journey, as the broader social world grappled with the implications of his relentless quest to defy death. Neighbors first noticed subtle signs of the boy's transformation: long hours spent in isolation, strange physical markings from self-inflicted trials, and an eerie serenity that contrasted with the boyish energy they once knew. Rumors circulated about secret experiments conducted in the family home, whispered accounts of fasting, exposure to cold, and other self-imposed hardships. Some regarded these stories with fascination, imagining a prodigy on the cusp of groundbreaking discovery. Others viewed them with fear, suspecting madness or even malevolent forces at work. Educators who had once admired the boy's intellect found themselves unsettled by his growing withdrawal and fixation on mortality. School attendance became irregular as his health fluctuated, and his participation in lessons waned. Teachers reported instances where the boy would disengage entirely, lost in thought or preoccupied with his latest theories. Attempts to redirect his focus toward more conventional studies met with resistance, as he insisted that understanding and conquering death was paramount above all else. Local healers and clergy, familiar with the community's spiritual and medical traditions, were among the first to voice explicit concern. They observed the physical effects of the boy's experiments: pallor, weakness, and signs of self-harm, and interpreted his pursuits through a moral and spiritual lens. To them, his obsession with death bordered on blasphemy, a dangerous challenge to the natural order and divine will. They warned his family of dire consequences should the boy persist in his path, advocating for prayer, exorcism, or traditional healing rituals to restore balance. This clash between emerging scientific curiosity and entrenched spiritual belief systems underscored the tension surrounding the boy's case. His family found themselves torn between supporting his intellectual passion and heeding the counsel of their community's healers, who urged caution and spiritual intervention. This external pressure compounded the internal struggles within the household, as the boy's relentless drive increasingly isolated him from those who loved him. A pivotal moment arrived when the boy's physical condition deteriorated noticeably, following an especially rigorous self-experiment. His parents, alarmed by his frailty and erratic behavior, sought the advice of a local physician, The doctor, a man versed in the rudimentary medical knowledge of the time, approached the case with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Upon examination, he noted signs of malnourishment, physical exhaustion, and psychological distress. While dismissing some of the boy's claims as fanciful or delusional, the physician recognized the seriousness of his condition and recommended supervised care. Despite these warnings, the boy remained insistent on continuing his experiments. His resolve, fueled by a conviction that only through relentless pursuit could death be conquered, clashed with the medical advice and familial pleas for restraint. This defiance deepened the rift between him and those around him, heightening fears for his safety and mental well-being. The community's response grew more organized, with concerned citizens petitioning for intervention to protect the boy. Discussions arose about the limits of parental authority when a child's actions threatened health and safety, a debate that reflected broader societal anxieties about childhood autonomy and the role of medical oversight. Some advocated for institutional care, believing that professional supervision was necessary to prevent further harm. Throughout this period, the boy's insistence on self-experimentation was accompanied by an unwavering belief in the validity and necessity of his methods. He articulated his views with remarkable clarity and passion, arguing that societal conventions and fears were obstacles to progress. To him, the pursuit of knowledge justified personal sacrifice, and the potential benefits for humanity outweighed individual suffering. The reactions of his peers added another dimension to the unfolding drama. Some children, drawn by his charisma and intellect, attempted to emulate his experiments or adopted his morbid fascination with death. This contagion of ideas unsettled parents and educators alike, who feared the spread of dangerous behaviors and the erosion of childhood innocence. Reports emerged of small groups engaging in risky trials, sharing visions and stories inspired by the boy's influence. Medical practitioners debated the nature of the boy's condition and the implications of his self-experimentation. Some viewed him as a remarkable case study in human resilience and intellectual fervor. Others saw signs of pathology, including obsessive-compulsive tendencies and early manifestations of psychological disorders. These divergent interpretations reflected the nascent state of psychiatric knowledge and the challenges of addressing such an unusual case. The tension between the boy's pursuit and the fears of his community culminated in a fraught atmosphere marked by mistrust, intervention attempts, and escalating concern. His family, caught between loyalty and desperation, struggled to navigate this complex landscape. Efforts to mediate between the boy's ambitions and the community's demands often failed, leading to episodes of confrontation and isolation. In this turbulent context, the boy's experiments took on an almost mythic quality within the community. Stories of his endurance, strange behaviors, and self-imposed suffering spread, blending fact and rumor. He became a figure both revered and feared, a symbol of human striving and the dangers of unchecked obsession. This chapter in the boy's story reveals the intricate interplay between individual ambition, family dynamics, and societal norms. It highlights the challenges faced when a child's extraordinary pursuits collide with communal values and medical understanding. The community's response, ranging from fascination to alarm, set the stage for more formal interventions and deeper scrutiny of the boy's condition, underscoring the complex human and social dimensions of his quest to cure death through himself. Faced with mounting concern from neighbors, educators, and medical professionals alike, the boy's family ultimately made the difficult decision to place him under medical supervision within a specialized facility equipped to monitor and study his unusual condition. This transition marked a significant shift in the boy's journey, a move from the relative privacy of his home to the structured and often impersonal environment of a hospital or asylum dedicated to observation and care. The decision was fraught with emotion, hope, and apprehension, reflecting the complex interplay of compassion and control that would define this new chapter. The facility itself was emblematic of the era's medical landscape, a place where emerging psychiatric and physiological sciences converged with long-standing traditions of custodial care. Its walls bore witness to a range of patients, from the mentally ill to those afflicted with chronic physical conditions, and its staff comprised physicians, nurses, and attendants, versed in the rudimentary but evolving practices of the time. For the boy, admission to this institution represented both an opportunity for close study and a loss of autonomy, as he entered a world governed by rules and routines foreign to his previous life. Upon arrival, the boy was met with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and wariness from the facility's personnel. Staff members, unaccustomed to cases involving such young and self-directed patients, observed him with a blend of professional interest and cautious distance. Some viewed his self-experimentation as a dangerous folly. Others detected in him a spark of genius worthy of careful attention. This spectrum of attitudes influenced the nature of his care and the tenor of interactions that would shape his stay. The physical environment of the institution was both austere and regimented, designed to maintain order and facilitate observation. His living quarters were sparse, furnished with basic necessities and arranged to limit opportunities for unsupervised experimentation. Although the boy's intellectual pursuits were not entirely suppressed, he was allowed access to books and writing materials. The structure of daily life imposed constraints that challenged his independence and sense of purpose. Central to the facility's approach was the assignment of a lead physician who assumed responsibility for the boy's case. This doctor, trained in the emerging fields of psychiatry and physiology, approached the boy with a combination of scientific rigor and empathetic curiosity. He initiated a program of thorough documentation, recording the boy's physical condition, mental state, and ongoing experiments with meticulous detail. These records would later serve as invaluable sources for understanding the complexities of the boy's condition and the broader questions his case raised. The physician's observations revealed a patient of exceptional intelligence and determination, whose behavior defied easy categorization within the medical frameworks of the time. The boy's insistence on continuing self-experimentation, even under supervision, challenged the boundaries of care and raised ethical dilemmas about autonomy and protection. The doctor grappled with balancing respect for the boy's agency against the imperative to prevent harm, a tension emblematic of the evolving medical ethics of the era. Within the institution, the boy's interactions with staff and other patients were marked by a mixture of isolation and guarded engagement. His peers, many older and afflicted with various ailments, regarded him with a combination of curiosity and distance. The boy's intense focus and unusual pursuits set him apart, limiting opportunities for typical socialization and deepening a sense of otherness. At times, he retreated into solitude, immersing himself in his experiments and writings, while at others he sought to communicate his ideas, striving to bridge the gap between his inner world and the external environment. The presence of medical staff introduced a new dynamic into the boy's life, one of observation and control, tempered by occasional moments of genuine connection. Nurses and attendants, tasked with monitoring his health and behavior, developed varying degrees of empathy and concern. Some became confidants, offering comfort in moments of distress. Others maintained professional detachment, wary of the unpredictability of his condition. These relationships contributed to a complex social environment within the institution, influencing the boy's emotional and psychological state. The facility's regimen, while structured to promote stability, also imposed limitations that tested the boy's resilience. Restrictions on movement, diet, and experimentation were sources of frustration and conflict. The boy's attempts to circumvent these controls, whether through secretive trials or intellectual challenges to authority, highlighted the ongoing struggle between his pursuit of knowledge and the constraints of institutional care. These episodes underscored the difficulty of accommodating a patient whose needs and ambitions transcended conventional treatment paradigms. Throughout his stay, the lead physician endeavored to understand the boy's motivations and experiences, conducting interviews and assessments that sought to unravel the intertwining of scientific inquiry and psychological obsession. The doctor documented changes in the boy's physical health, noting the paradoxical interplay of decline and resilience as experiments took their toll. Mental evaluations revealed a mind oscillating between brilliance and despair, clarity and fixation, reflecting the profound challenges posed by his condition. The institution itself became a microcosm of contemporary medical debates about the nature of mental illness, the ethics of self-experimentation, and the limits of scientific knowledge. The boy's case prompted discussions among staff and visiting experts regarding diagnosis, prognosis, and the appropriate balance between care and control. His presence challenged prevailing assumptions about childhood, agency, and the capacity for self-directed inquiry, forcing a re-evaluation of established norms. Despite the constraints and challenges, the boy continued his quest within the walls of the institution, adapting his methods to the new environment. His experiments took on a more introspective character, focusing on mental discipline, controlled breathing, and psychological endurance. These adaptations reflected both his ingenuity and the influence of the institution's supervision, illustrating the complex interplay between individual agency and external authority. This chapter in the boy's story reveals a profound transition from solitary pursuit in the home to monitored observation within a medical facility. It exposes the tensions inherent in managing a young mind, driven by extraordinary ambition and self-directed inquiry, set against the backdrop of evolving medical practices and societal expectations. The boy's admission to the institution marked not only a change in setting, but a deepening of the mysteries surrounding his quest to cure death by using himself as the instrument of discovery. Within the cold and regimented walls of the medical facility, the young boy found himself increasingly isolated, not merely by the physical barriers that separated him from the outside world, but by the profound distance his condition and pursuits placed between himself and others. This isolation, both imposed and self-selected, became a defining feature of his existence during this period, intensifying the psychological complexities that accompanied his relentless quest to conquer death through self-experimentation. The staff, while attentive to his physical needs and observant of his behaviors, often regarded him with a mixture of clinical detachment and cautious intrigue. His unusual combination of youthful intellect and obsessive focus was difficult to categorize within the prevailing medical frameworks, leading to a delicate balance between supervision and allowance. The boy was permitted a degree of freedom to continue his mental and physical trials, yet this autonomy was circumscribed by the institution's protocols designed to prevent harm. This constrained liberty fostered an internal world rich with intellectual fervor, but fraught with emotional turbulence. The boy oscillated between moments of radiant clarity and debilitating despair, a pendulum swing that mirrored the intensity of his self-imposed mission. His writings from this time reveal a mind consumed by paradox, a yearning for connection juxtaposed with a profound sense of alienation, an unyielding hope shadowed by the specter of mortality. Physically, the boy exhibited signs of both resilience and deterioration. His body endured the strains of his experiments and the restrictions of institutional life, sometimes rebounding with surprising vigor, other times succumbing to fatigue and illness. The staff noted fluctuations in his health, which seemed to correlate with the intensity of his trials and the emotional states they engendered. These observations underscored the intricate interplay between mind and body that characterized his condition. Psychologically, the isolation exacted a heavy toll. Removed from familiar surroundings and the support of family, the boy confronted the loneliness inherent in his singular pursuit. His interactions with other patients were limited and often superficial, hindered by differences in age, condition, and cognition. The boy's preoccupation with death and self-experimentation set him apart, rendering him an outsider within the institution's social milieu. In response to this isolation, the boy developed intricate coping mechanisms rooted in intellectual engagement and mental discipline. He immersed himself in study, correspondence, and the meticulous documentation of his experiments and observations. These activities provided a semblance of control and purpose, anchoring him amidst the upheaval of confinement and uncertainty. Yet beneath this veneer of control lay moments of profound vulnerability. The boy's journals disclose episodes of despair, frustration, and existential questioning. He grappled with the limits of his own endurance, the apparent futility of his efforts, and the emotional weight of solitude. These inner struggles, often concealed from the staff and fellow patients, revealed the human cost of his extraordinary quest. The lead physician, recognizing the psychological dimensions of the boy's condition, sought to engage him in dialogue, aimed at understanding and alleviating his distress. These interactions were marked by a delicate dance of trust and skepticism, as the boy guarded his thoughts and motivations, while the physician endeavored to penetrate the layers of obsession and isolation. The physician's notes reflect a growing awareness of the boy's complex inner world and the challenges inherent in providing care that honored both his autonomy and vulnerability. Within the institution, the boy's presence influenced the environment in subtle yet palpable ways. Staff reported fluctuations in the atmosphere, moments when the air seemed charged with tension or stillness, coinciding with his periods of intense focus or withdrawal. Some observers noted changes in temperature or the wilting of nearby plants during his episodes of distress, phenomena that added an almost uncanny dimension to his condition and deepened the mystery surrounding him. The boy's oscillation between brilliance and despair manifested in his social behavior as well. At times, he sought connection, engaging staff and occasionally other patients in discussions about his theories and experiments. These moments of openness offered glimpses into a mind capable of extraordinary insight and eloquence. Yet, these were often fleeting, giving way to withdrawal and silence that reinforced his isolation. This pattern of engagement and retreat contributed to a complex psychological profile that challenged the facility's staff and informed their evolving care strategies. Therapies and interventions were attempted with varying degrees of success, including structured activities aimed at socialization and emotional expression. However, the boy's singular focus on his quest often overshadowed these efforts, limiting their efficacy. The isolation also amplified the boy's internal dialogues and imaginative faculties. He explored philosophical questions about existence, consciousness, and the nature of death with increasing depth. His reflections intertwined scientific inquiry with metaphysical speculation, revealing a mind striving to reconcile empirical observation with the mysteries that eluded rational explanation. These internal explorations were both a refuge and a source of torment. The boy's writings convey a tension between the hope that knowledge and transformation were attainable and the despair that such goals might remain forever out of reach. This emotional ambivalence underscored the profound psychological impact of his isolation and obsession. Throughout this period, the boy's isolation was not solely a product of external circumstances, but also a manifestation of his own choices and psychological state. His dedication to experimentation and his intense preoccupation with mortality created barriers to typical social interaction and emotional openness. This self-imposed solitude, while facilitating focus, also entrenched patterns of loneliness and alienation. The boy's experience within the institution thus exemplifies the complex interplay between isolation, mental state, and the pursuit of knowledge. It highlights the challenges faced by caregivers in addressing the needs of an individual whose intellectual ambitions and psychological vulnerabilities are deeply intertwined. The institution became a crucible in which the boy's brilliance and fragility were laid bare, illuminating the human dimensions of a quest that transcended ordinary boundaries. This chapter in the boy's life reveals the profound psychological landscape shaped by isolation, obsession, and the search for meaning. It underscores the delicate balance between autonomy and care, intellect and emotion, connection and solitude. In this crucible of confinement and inquiry, the boy's journey toward understanding death, and perhaps defying it, continued with a complexity and intensity that would define the trajectory of his remaining days. Amid the confines of the medical facility, the boy embarked upon a pivotal experiment that would profoundly impact both his physical state and psychological condition, marking a moment of intense consequence in his relentless pursuit to conquer death. This critical trial, conceived with the determination and rigor that had characterized his prior endeavors, sought to push the boundaries of human endurance and transformation further than ever before, testing the limits of his own body and mind in ways that would reverberate throughout his remaining days. The experiment was carefully planned and documented, reflecting the boy's methodical approach despite the inherent risks involved. Drawing upon his extensive studies of physiology and emerging medical theories, he designed a regimen combining prolonged fasting, controlled exposure to extreme cold, and intricate breathing techniques aimed at altering his metabolic processes. His objective was to induce a state of suspended animation or physiological stasis, a condition he believed could arrest the progression of death and perhaps reverse its effects. As the trial commenced, the boy entered an isolation chamber within the facility, a space adapted to regulate temperature and monitor vital signs with as much precision as the era's technology permitted. Medical staff observed with a mixture of apprehension and scientific curiosity, aware of the unprecedented nature of the undertaking and the potential dangers it entailed. The boy himself exhibited a calm resolve, his demeanor reflecting both the gravity of the endeavor and his unwavering commitment to its success. During the initial phases, the boy's body responded with expected physiological stress, hypothermia symptoms, weakened pulse, and diminished responsiveness. Yet, observers noted paradoxical signs that defied simple explanation. Despite the physical decline, moments of heightened mental clarity and unusual resilience emerged, suggesting a complex interplay between his body's deterioration and his mind's capacity to endure and adapt. These contradictory phenomena intrigued the attending physicians and deepened the enigma surrounding his condition. As the experiment progressed, the boy entered prolonged periods of altered consciousness, during which he appeared semi-catatonic, yet responsive to subtle stimuli. His eyes, at times described as unnervingly lucid and focused, seemed to pierce the veil between life and death. Nurses assigned to his care reported sensations of unease and a palpable shift in the atmosphere of the chamber, accounts that lent an almost supernatural dimension to the proceedings. The medical team meticulously recorded vital signs, neurological responses, and behavioral changes, striving to interpret the boy's condition within the framework of contemporary science. Debates arose among the physicians regarding the nature of the state he had induced. Was it a form of hibernation, a neurological anomaly, or something altogether unprecedented? These discussions highlighted the limitations of medical knowledge at the time and the challenges posed by the boy's extraordinary case. Throughout the trial, the boy's physical health fluctuated unpredictably. Episodes of apparent decline were interspersed with signs of remarkable endurance, confounding expectations and raising questions about the mechanisms at play. His metabolic rate appeared suppressed, yet his cognitive functions, as evidenced by intermittent responses and recorded observations, remained active. This paradox challenged prevailing understandings of life processes and invited speculation about the possibility of transcending biological constraints. The psychological impact of the experiment on the boy was profound. After emerging from the induced states, he exhibited signs of exhaustion and disorientation, but also moments of intense insight and renewed determination. His journals from this period reveal reflections on the boundaries between consciousness and oblivion, the nature of existence, and the tantalizing prospect of mastery over death. These writings convey a mind grappling with both the promise and the peril of his radical methods. Medical staff noted changes in the boy's demeanor following the experiment. While his intellectual fervor persisted, there were indications of increased vulnerability, episodes of confusion, emotional volatility, and physical fragility. These developments raised concerns about the long-term consequences of his self-induced states and the sustainability of his approach. The physician overseeing the case grappled with ethical questions about the risks involved and the limits of permissible experimentation, especially given the boy's youth and the facility's custodial responsibilities. The experiment also intensified discussions among the medical community regarding the potential and perils of self-experimentation, particularly in cases involving extreme physical and psychological stress. Some practitioners lauded the boy's courage and pioneering spirit, viewing the trial as a bold step toward new frontiers in medicine. Others cautioned against the dangers of unregulated, self-directed trials, emphasizing the need for safeguards and the ethical imperative to protect vulnerable individuals. Within the facility, the boy's experiment became a focal point for both hope and apprehension. Staff and observers were drawn into the unfolding drama, witnessing a singular human struggle at the intersection of science, mortality, and willpower. The experiment's outcomes, ambiguous yet compelling, fueled ongoing debates about the nature of life and death, the possibilities of medical intervention, and the mysteries that remained beyond the reach of contemporary knowledge. As the boy's physical condition gradually declined in the aftermath of the experiment, his mental state reflected a complex mixture of resignation, insight, and persistent striving. He articulated cryptic expressions about the interplay of life forces and the boundaries of human experience, hinting at revelations gleaned through his trials yet shrouded in the ambiguity of his condition. These moments underscored the enigmatic nature of his quest, simultaneously illuminating and obscuring the path forward. The medical team documented the progressive deterioration with a combination of clinical rigor and empathetic concern. Autopsies and post-mortem analyses, conducted after the boy's eventual passing, would later reveal unusual physiological markers and neurological anomalies, deepening the mystery and prompting further inquiry. These findings challenged conventional understandings and suggested that the boy's experiments had induced changes beyond those typically observed in natural death. This chapter in the boy's story captures a moment of profound significance, an experiment that encapsulated the hopes, risks, and complexities of using oneself as the instrument to defy death. It reveals the paradoxes inherent in his condition, the coexistence of deterioration and resilience, clarity and confusion, life and the shadow of its cessation. The trial stands as a testament to human curiosity and the perilous pursuit of knowledge at the edge of existence, illuminating the fragile boundary that separates science from the unknown. The boy's final days unfolded amidst a gradual decline that bore the marks of both his prolonged self-experimentation and the inexorable approach of mortality, a paradoxical mixture of physical frailty and a strange, almost serene composure that captivated those who witnessed his passing. As his body weakened under the cumulative toll of his trials, his mind appeared to transcend the immediate suffering, offering glimpses of insight and cryptic reflections on the nature of life and death that would linger in the memories of caregivers and chroniclers alike. In these closing moments, the boy exhibited a calmness uncharacteristic of his earlier struggles, an acceptance that seemed to reconcile the fierce determination that had driven him with the reality he could no longer evade. His gaze, often described by observers as penetrating and distant, suggested a consciousness attuned to realms beyond the physical, a silent dialogue with the mysteries he had long sought to unravel. This eerie tranquility imbued his passing with a profound poignancy, transforming it from mere cessation into a moment laden with symbolic weight. Throughout this period, the medical staff maintained vigilant care, documenting the progressive deterioration with clinical precision while grappling with the emotional impact of losing a patient whose life had been so singularly defined by the quest to conquer death. The boy's condition manifested in typical signs of systemic decline, weakening pulse, labored breathing, and diminished responsiveness. Yet these were juxtaposed against moments of lucidity, wherein he articulated thoughts that hinted at a deeper understanding beyond his years. His final utterances were marked by cryptic expressions that mingled scientific terminology with philosophical musings. He spoke of the threshold, the flow beyond, and the dance of life and oblivion, phrases that confounded listeners yet resonated with the themes that had permeated his life's work. These enigmatic remarks underscored the complex interplay of knowledge and mystery that had characterized his existence, leaving those around him with a sense of awe and unresolved wonder. The boy's family, present during these last hours, experienced a mixture of grief, pride, and bewilderment. They mourned the loss of a child whose brilliance had been both a blessing and a burden, whose quest had isolated him, yet illuminated profound questions about human mortality. Their reflections, recorded in personal correspondences and testimonies, reveal the deep emotional ambivalence engendered by his extraordinary life and death. Following his passing, an autopsy was conducted under the supervision of the lead physician and other medical experts, intended to uncover the physiological underpinnings of the boy's condition and the effects of his self-experimentation. The examination revealed unusual neurological development, including a typical neural density and synaptic configurations that defied conventional anatomical descriptions. These findings suggested that the boy's brain had undergone transformations potentially linked to his intense mental focus and experimental practices. Moreover, the autopsy uncovered anomalies in the boy's metabolic and cellular structures, with evidence of altered tissue resilience and signs of slow decomposition, a phenomenon that puzzled medical examiners and challenged existing scientific paradigms. These biological irregularities fueled speculation about the extent to which the boy's body had been altered by his attempts to conquer death, raising questions that would perplex researchers for decades. The implications of these findings extended beyond mere medical curiosity. They touched upon fundamental questions about the plasticity of the human organism, the relationship between mind and body, and the potential for deliberate self-transformation. The boy's case became a reference point in emerging discourses on bioethics, the limits of medical intervention, and the nature of consciousness itself. The meticulous documentation compiled by the lead physician and supporting staff during the boy's life and after his death formed a foundational archive that would inform subsequent studies into anomalous medical phenomena. These records, comprising clinical notes, personal diaries, and experimental data, provided a rare and compelling window into the intersection of childhood genius, psychological obsession, and the enigmatic quest to transcend mortality. Within medical and philosophical circles, debates ensued regarding the interpretation of the boy's life and death. Some viewed his endeavors as pioneering, a testament to human courage and the drive to expand the boundaries of life. Others cautioned against romanticizing his story, emphasizing the ethical quandaries and psychological costs inherent in such extreme self-experimentation. This discourse reflected broader societal tensions about the pursuit of knowledge and the sanctity of human life. Beyond the scientific realm, the boy's story resonated culturally as a symbol of humanity's enduring struggle against the inevitability of death. His life became a narrative through which questions of existence, identity, and the limits of human experience were explored in literature, art, and philosophy. The enigmatic nature of his final days and the mysteries unveiled by his autopsy contributed to a legacy that transcended temporal and disciplinary boundaries. This chapter in the boy's life encapsulates the culmination of an extraordinary journey, a passage marked by physical decline, intertwined with profound insight, personal sacrifice, and the enduring enigma of the human condition. It reveals the complex tapestry of hope, despair, knowledge, and mystery that defined his quest to cure death, using himself as the instrument of discovery. The final moments stand as a testament to the fragile yet resilient spirit that confronts mortality with both defiance and acceptance, leaving a legacy that continues to inspire and challenge generations of seekers and scholars. The legacy of the boy who sought to cure death using himself as the instrument of discovery reverberates through the annals of medical history, philosophy, and ethics, offering a profound reflection on humanity's enduring struggle with mortality and the pursuit of knowledge. His life, marked by extraordinary intellect, relentless self-experimentation, and profound psychological complexity, challenges us to reconsider the boundaries between science and the human spirit, the ethical limits of self-directed inquiry, and the very nature of life and death. In the years following his passing, the boy's story became a touchstone for debates surrounding mortality and medical ethics. His radical methods and their consequences fueled discussions about the responsibilities of caregivers, the autonomy of patients, especially those so young, and the moral implications of self-experimentation. His case underscored the need for frameworks that balance the pursuit of scientific advancement with the protection of vulnerable individuals, a concern that resonates in contemporary bioethical discourse. Modern interpretations of the boy's behavior and condition have sought explanations grounded in advances across multiple disciplines. Psychologists have examined his obsessive focus as a manifestation of early-onset mental health disorders, exploring the interplay between genius and pathology. Neurologists have considered the atypical brain structures identified during autopsy as evidence of neuroplasticity driven by intense cognitive activity. Medical historians have contextualized his self-experimentation within a lineage of scientific pioneers who risked personal harm in the quest for understanding. These varied perspectives enrich our comprehension of his life, situating it at the crossroads of science, psychology, and culture. The boy's narrative also serves as a poignant symbol of human aspiration, the desire to transcend the limitations imposed by nature and to wrest mastery over fate itself. His willingness to endure pain, isolation, and uncertainty in pursuit of a cure for death embodies a universal theme: the tension between acceptance of mortality and the hope for transcendence. This theme echoes through literature, philosophy, and spiritual traditions, linking his personal journey to broader human experiences and existential questions. Furthermore, his story invites reflection on the costs of such quests. The sacrifices demanded by his self-experimentation, physical deterioration, social isolation, psychological strain, highlight the delicate balance between courage and recklessness, ambition and hubris. His life warns of the perils inherent in the unchecked pursuit of knowledge, especially when undertaken without the safeguards of support and understanding. This cautionary dimension remains relevant as contemporary science explores frontiers in genetics, longevity, and consciousness. The meticulous documentation produced by the boy and his physicians has left an indelible mark on medical literature, inspiring subsequent generations of researchers to examine the intersections of mind, body, and mortality with renewed vigor. His case has been cited in studies exploring the limits of human endurance, the nature of consciousness, and the ethical dimensions of experimental medicine. The enigmatic photographs and records associated with his time in the facility continue to provoke curiosity and debate, serving as artifacts of a singular human endeavor. In cultural terms, the boy's story transcends the realm of science, entering the domain of myth and metaphor. He has been portrayed in works of fiction, art, and philosophy as an emblem of the human condition, caught between the known and the unknown, life and death, science and mystery. His figure embodies the paradoxes of existence, brilliance and fragility, hope and despair, the quest for immortality, and the inevitability of loss. These representations perpetuate his legacy, inviting ongoing interpretation and engagement. Ultimately, the boy's life and quest challenge us to confront fundamental questions. What does it mean to live and to die? How far should one go in the pursuit of knowledge? What are the ethical boundaries that govern our explorations of the self and the natural world? His story does not offer definitive answers, but rather illuminates the complexity of these inquiries, encouraging humility, compassion, and critical reflection. As a symbol, he stands at the intersection of medicine, philosophy, and the unexplained, a testament to the indomitable human spirit and the mysteries that lie beyond empirical comprehension. His journey compels us to consider not only the scientific possibilities, but also the profound human costs and ethical dimensions of seeking to transcend our mortal bounds. In doing so, the boy who tried to cure death, using himself as the instrument of discovery, leaves a legacy that continues to inspire, caution, and provoke thought across disciplines and generations.